Welcome to Retired. Hello, I'm Sue Britz. This is the second in a special limited series entitled Moving On. In keeping with the concept of our podcast, Retired, I continue on this journey of processing grief and loss. In this episode, I revisit the last week with my dad. So, in thinking about doing this podcast, this special Moving On, I keep coming back to that question of why. Why do I feel compelled to record this? And, I'm coming across a few answers to that. I think that part of it is for me that this is a modern, today's version of a journal, a diary. And in my youth, I always kept diaries and journals, and a lot of them have been mislaid along the way. But this one, this podcast version, is a way to preserve for myself my thinking and my processing, but also to share that with family and friends that are important, with the everyday listener as well, who's going through their own version of grief. I also understand that this is a way to talk with my daughter and preserve for her feelings that I have about the loss of my dad. One of the strongest characteristics my dad had was responsibility. He was a good family man, and he certainly passed that on to me. I have felt the yoke of responsibility sometimes to the point where I'm very resentful of it. I want to reject it, and at the same time, it's really a part of who I am, that idea of being loyal to yourself and to others and to society as a whole. And so I know that a little part of me was about responsibility of being there with Dad. I knew he was fearful. Very fearful of death, something he never wanted to even talk about, something that I know he experienced a lot of grief in watching his mother die of leukemia as a teenager and a young man. And he just didn't want to talk about death. Even when his older sister, my godmother, dear Aunt Bev, she passed away not too long ago, and he just didn't want to talk about it. He wanted to go and honor her and be with the family, but never wanted to even discuss the idea of death. So, in choosing to go, I just wanted to be there with him and help him through that and understand that for myself as well. Growing up with a family, parents that didn't discuss death, I didn't have much experience with it, and so I wanted to confront it, accept it as part of life, and not be afraid of death. It's a natural part of life, and so I felt it was a privilege. It's an honor, and so I went. In the previous visit, we had moved Dad into assisted living, because he knew that it was time to get help that he needed. His cancer was doing its job really quickly, and there were no more treatments, so it was time to get the help that he needed. And that was one of the reasons that he had chosen to live in the facility that he was. Just a week and a day after we had gotten him into assisted living and into hospice, he said he wanted to change rooms again. Understandably, he said it was too loud. His room was adjacent to, right next door to the laundry room, and he said people were doing laundry late at night and slamming the door. Thankfully, the facility helped mediate that. People were so helpful and supportive in all areas. In the dining hall, just making things happen. Housekeeping was amazing. They came in and helped out when they needed. And management was amazing too. They made it all happen. So we're very grateful to the facility. Dad's brother came out to visit all the way from Toronto. He was able to meet with Dad, and they spent some good time together. It was very meaningful that his brother came out to see him. Meanwhile, back home, I was back home in California, and I got my mom signed up for hospice. Dad accepted that idea, knowing that he was going to be gone. Up until this point, Dad had been visiting Mom twice a day, usually, to take care of her and give her attention, and he knew that when he was gone, it would be very different. So the idea of having hospice be there and have another set of eyes on taking care of her was important to do. My brother and sister-in-law went back out to Arizona the last week of May and into June. Their sons came along with their spouses. My brother and sister-in-law stayed an extra week. They left the day that I arrived, and my brother, let me know by text that Dad wasn't doing so well, that he was kind of declining, and his mobility was an issue. So I decided it was time to come out. I knew it wasn't going to be so long. Dad was still taking Tylenol around the clock. That was his only pain medicine. He was still taking his blood pressure medicine. While my brother was out there, he tried a dose of morphine to help with his breathing on the advice of his hospice nurse. And he didn't like how it felt. And I got a text from my brother saying he's doing this the way he wants and is okay with it. So that's really how my dad decided to manage his death. He started using Thicket. He was having a hard time swallowing. He probably wasn't hydrated enough. For those of you who don't know, Thicket is this stuff it's a thickener that you put into liquid, typically water. It could be other things like any other liquid that you like, juice or whatever. And it has no flavor, and it helps people who can't swallow to swallow. And Dad needed that a reassurance on how to swallow, learning how to put his chin down in order to get the liquid down. Dad is so literal in following nurse and doctor instructions, not using necessarily his overarching judgment or what he wants to do. So he followed the instructions very closely about what he could and could not have. I'm of the mind, you're in your last days, if not hours. You can have and do whatever you want. This is the time. But Dad was going to follow those instructions. I have two sisters who live in the area, and they would visit along with my sister's family. She's got a daughter who lives far away, and so her family came and visited as well. It was so wonderful for her to come out with her boys and her husband, and everyone get to see Dad and give him attention and love, and let him know that everyone was there for him. Dad started using Ensure. Ensure is another one of these things they give people that has nutrition in it. Again, I'm kind of thinking, you're dying. Why would you want to drink Ensure? Wouldn't you rather have a milkshake? Wouldn't you rather have some juice, coffee, whatever it is that the flavor that you like? Because nutrition at this point isn't the priority. Dad found out that I was coming out. He knew that I had agreed to be there and stay with him. And he was trying to make arrangements to get me a cot and overseeing where we would place it and so forth. And he did say to me, "Please come. Please come." So I did, because Dad would never ask for that. So he knew. And I knew. So I got on the plane. It was Friday. On the way to my dad's, I stopped by the grocery store and picked up some drink alternatives for Dad. You need something thicker so you can swallow it more easily. And I wanted to get some food for myself too, so I wouldn't have to leave. Dad so enjoyed eating up until the last time I saw him. He was still talking about the wonder of the dining hall and the wonderful job the chef did with his food, and he really enjoyed everything. That was what we talked about on the phone, how he would describe the food and how much he enjoyed it. And that was just a month ago. So I was thinking, okay, milkshakes and bananas and nectar and so forth. So I got some of that. When I arrived, my sisters were there as well as my godchild, and I learned his routine for drinking and swallowing. I was instructed on how to help out with that. I stayed on that lumpy hammock-like cot at his feet. He tried to use his hospital bed, but he couldn't get comfortable. I mean, this was the cancer in his kidney, and it was just painful whenever he moved. He whimpered and he talked at night. He moaned and still would not take anything more than Tylenol. Another change from the month before that I'd been there is I had to help him move and use the walker, but not just the walker, the seat on the walker, to move him from place to place. So I saw those changes, and it's an odd thing laying there at night and hearing your dad struggle and him not wanting any help, trying not to moan, I'm sure, but he had to do it his own way, like my brother said. The next day, I started off by suggesting that maybe he try something more tasty than just the thicket, or put it in the thicket. So I thought, we could try juice or nectar or beer, because the previous month we had enjoyed sharing a beer and talking about memories. He finally accepted lemon-flavored vitamin water in his thicket. And then as he thought about it, analyzed the idea about it, as the engineer in him does, he accepted putting beer into the thicket. So he did. It was all about giving him options and allowing him some time and staying calm and supportive and helping him. And I learned not to be insistent, not to play mama bear, just to be there and suggest ideas and make it happen if he accepted. So he started accepting, and then he started asking for ice cream any time of the day. This was also so not my dad, but finally understanding that he was at a place where he could have ice cream whenever he wanted. You might remember in the last episode of Moving On, he talked about ice cream, his memories of ice cream as a kid during the war, and how amazing it was to have ice cream, to have that moment. So something as simple as ice cream, and understanding the memories, hearing the memories, and understanding the memories, and then the lifetime that we had where, ice cream was always for something special, and something simple like that was meaningful and nostalgic for me too, and it made me feel really connected and knowing him. But so he started taking ice cream, and that's where the dining hall really helped out. I'd go down there and ask for 3 or 4 containers of ice cream. They give you these little small cups, and they're like, oh, sure, because normally in the past they wouldn't. You only get 1 per meal or whatever, but they were very helpful and with that. So Dad had ice cream anytime he wanted it, and it would be small little mouthfuls, but he would finish that cup because he enjoyed it. He insisted also on dressing himself, and he would do so slowly. I wheeled him in his wheelchair over to see Mom. And this was, really poignant. Mom, who's in memory care, has Alzheimer's, sometimes in the past hadn't remembered who he was, thinking that maybe he was her father. She said, "Are you okay, dear?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm just tired." But she knew. We played Rummy Cube, my mom's favorite. Dad talked to his friend Sherwin on the phone. He returned a call. And, he's trying to communicate with his friends, and family and people are important, but he cut off that phone call pretty quickly because it was emotional. He started avoiding people in the hallway. He didn't want to go out on the wheelchair and see people. And, he'd bump into somebody and they would say, give him their best wishes and hope that he was doing well. And everyone knowing that, Dad was dying. And it's a weird, hard thing to do because our society doesn't really deal with this. So Dad did what he could by, at some point, avoiding people. Didn't want to go out and have people see him, which I think also from his point of view was about them not only not seeing him, but thinking about their own mortality. So spare people that. He took a 2-hour sustained nap. Now that was unusual because the pain usually would get him so he couldn't sleep. But the recliner was very helpful with that. My sister arrived then and we went to go see Mom. It was a quick visit. Dad kept saying that he's not in pain, that he's sleeping just fine. So, putting on that front or not accepting it for himself, I think both of those are truths, that this was his way of fighting it. And he would say he's not sure if he's dreaming. He says he wants to fight, that if he doesn't fight, it'll be over. So, we didn't talk much about that elephant in the room. I had tried bringing up the idea, talk about death, decades before, and getting his affairs in order and understanding what it is that he might want and suggesting options for how he might deal with my mom's dementia and their aging. And always it was like, just put it out there, let him chew on it a while, and that's the way he handled it. I think it's as much about his personality as his generation. But I took his lead, and if I did bring something up, I let it go if he wouldn't engage with it. I knew that there was that being there. I knew that being there is what mattered. And I'm so grateful to have been able to spend time with my parents on all those visits and vacations that we did together before Mom's dementia. I felt I knew them, and those conversations that we had had helped a lot. They weren't really in depth, and they were always avoidant kind of conversations, but they occurred. Even if you're close with someone and you love them, you may not know what they really want or believe about important things, especially end of life, about death. You got to talk about it. And I felt so privileged to be able to do so, even in a indirect way that I did over time with my folks. It was a very restless night. Sunday, I had brought with me and made my deep roast Pete's half-calf coffee that I have every morning. And this morning, he asked for some of it with no thicket. This was a big deal. In the past, he would have said it was way too strong. But he enjoyed the sips. It smelled so good, he said. It was funny, every person that came in, hospice or the folks that worked there, they go, oh, it smells so good. Yeah, enjoy those simple pleasures. Enjoy those simple pleasures. My godchild and her family came to visit, along with my sister and her other daughter. My other sister came, so family was gathering around. And we all took turns. We all helped out. We didn't hover too much, which was important. Just being there and interacting with each other and seeing Dad, knowing that Dad is watching us interact with each other. He loved that. My sister wanted to get him applesauce with sugar because the facility only had the non-sugar applesauce, and she was concerned about him losing weight and needing calories. I asked to talk with her out in the hallway because, it's like, do you understand that Dad is dying? This is, I think we all just go right to our natural instinct reaction of you need to feed somebody, you need to keep them warm, you need to build them up again. And, you practice that all your life. And so in these last days, we have to be reminded, we need to remind ourselves that we need something different at this time. And maybe something more tasty, but that was a weird realization. You're fighting your routines of a lifetime of trying to preserve your life. And now it's more about the quality of the time that you have left. And that time you have left is very small. So not being concerned about calories and so forth. I told my sister again the wisdom I learned from my wife, who's a retired hospice nurse. When things change month by month, then it's months. Week by week, weeks. Day by day, days. Hour by hour. It helps in framing death and understanding what to expect. The day before, I'd asked my youngest sister to bring our ingredients for a martini for Dad to offer him. Because if we asked him if he wanted it and we would go out and get it, he would have said no. But to have the ingredients on hand would be good. My sister was on top of it. She went to the store, and she even brought a beautiful glass martini glass to bring. I thought it would be too heavy for him to pick up because he was at that point. She brought a shaker, airplane-sized vodka, and a whole bottle of vermouth because that's all there was. She couldn't get the small ones. We got ice. We iced the glass in the freezer. And then he's sitting in his chair, and I would just shake up a martini. I shook it, that delightful sound of ice in a shaker. And he asked what it was. And I said, "Oh, Dad, I'm making myself a martini. Would you like one?" "Yes, in the ice glass." It was perfect. He only took a few sips, but it was heaven. You should have seen that smile on his face. And he relaxed as much from the effects of those few tiny sips and also the memories, I think, of enjoying a martini, shaken, not stirred. Dad had a restless night's sleep. He was whimpering and getting from bed to the recliner. He almost cried, saying he is so weak that soon he'll be stuck in bed. The bed was never going to be comfortable for him, so that chair gave him some reprieve. My little sister arrived back, and Dad insisted on taking a shower by himself. So even as his strength is diminishing, even as he's realizing how weak he is, this is what he wanted. He said some things that were not very rational, but he was adamant. And my little sister tried to insist that he be helped by us or by the staff, but yeah, that was a no. All right, so it was getting to the point of almost arguing about it. So I said that, well, we don't agree, and we sisters don't agree, and it's dangerous. We're right here for you if you need us. He was establishing his will very clearly, his fight. It was beautifully sad. After the shower, he called for me to come help dress him. He was frustrated that there wasn't staff right there to do things, that us doing it was somehow a loss. I don't know. He appreciated and complimented the staff as individuals, but he expected a higher level of care. And he just didn't get that, there's not going to be someone sitting right there next to you taking care of every need. Oh, except your children. I told him that even in a hospital, it would not be like that, but that we were there for him. He got settled and, he called for his martini and his frozen glass. He insisted on that frozen glass. He loved his sips, still from the same little bottle from yesterday. And we took a photo. It's going to be a meaningful photo, I think, forever. To life. So he slept in his recliner, which was a change. He finally accepted that's where he was going to sleep, and there was no whimpering. Later that day, we sat there and we watched. He wanted to watch a video. He has this library of DVDs and CDs and VHSs. And I said, what do you want to watch? And he chose Hidden Figures. And I think that's always going to have a special meaning for me, too. We hadn't been watching shows together like we had last month. And so for him to ask for something to watch and then to choose that, it was interesting. He really didn't talk much, and it was hard to understand him because he couldn't speak much. But I think he chose that because the engineer in him. At the end, he exclaimed about the unjust treatment of women in the movie, which blows me away. Yeah. All right, Tuesday. From 10 o'clock the previous night, he played with that electric hospital bed up and down, moving, sliding, shifting. He would settle for like 3 to 5 minutes at the most, and he kept doing that for about an hour. And then finally, he accepts help to get over to the recliner so he can rest there. He slept, and then he called out in a panic. He needed applesauce for his dry throat. This was another change. And then that night, he fell asleep, and it lasted till about 3:30. And they arrived around 5:15 with his Tylenol, always just the Tylenol. And he called them for help to go to the bathroom. Wouldn't let his daughter help him, but, there we go. So he took Tylenol and went back to sleep. He had been up 6 times that night for applesauce. So not much sleep going on. That morning when he woke up, he said, I dreamed that I worked out with Hospice of the Valley for you and Melinda and me to go on a cruise to Alaska. I worked out all the details, and they said no. And he laughed. So imagine him being able to say all that. It came out in little bits and pieces. But here he was. These were his dreams, that he was still working with Hospice of the Valley, fighting death, but then working out to go on a cruise, all the details done. Yeah. That's my dad. He loved travel. And it's one of the wonderful things that he passed on to us, certainly to me. It's an adventure. It's learning. It's amazing. So, inevitably, check in on how he's feeling. I'm not in pain. I just have anxiety. Wow. That's the first time I've ever heard him say that he felt anxious. Yeah, I knew I could observe the anxiety, but for him to say those words out loud, that was amazing. So, big change. But, he refused medication. In a hospice care kit, they include medication for anxiety as well as for pain. But it was a no. He was obsessed with his shower, though. Through hospice, home health care workers would come twice a week to help with showers. And he was indignant. He wanted it at least 3 times a week, which I can understand. But, just pay for a shower, an extra shower. It's okay. Oh, and by the way, your children are here. They could help you, and there are ways to help someone and do so and still maintain dignity. There's ways we can figure this out. He tells me, call hospice and ask for it. He wanted me to demand this from hospice, which they're not going to. This is not they can't. It's not in their purview to do, but he was just indignant. So Dad had scheduled a haircut for himself and for Mom weeks before. Usually this was something he did on his own, outside at a barber, but it was kind of a big deal to do it in-house because it costs a little more. It's so, as he says, I've got money for this and that. He won't spend the money on getting an extra shower or getting the haircut. And it's like, this is the time to do those things. And that's something I'm going to remember too. There's a time to do the things while you can do them. So my sisters both came and helped out with the logistics of moving them to get to the hair cutter. And it was quite the show. I had to go get Mom out of memory care, and Dad was on the other floor and go up to the hair cutter. The hair cutter was new that day, filling in for someone else and running behind, even though it was still just 9 a.m. Dad was very impatient. His friend who had the next appointment came, and it's like, whoa, yeah, Dad's said they're running behind. And so he left and came back later. Mom got her hair cut, and then finally Dad. Wednesday's the last day. He wakes up and again tells me, come over here, I have an idea. Again, kind of croaking it out, whimpering it out because he's having a hard time talking. He says, I have an idea. I can rent a 2-bedroom unit in memory care for you, Sue, to stay in with Mom. Presumably for when it comes time to help Mom out. I have plenty of money. So, again, I said to him, Dad, I can't even imagine staying in a memory care unit at all. They have rooms upstairs that I could stay in for guests and come and be with Mom throughout the day. And he goes, yeah, okay. Yeah. So he's having these dreams of how to problem solve and take care of Mom. He knows this is it, He's just obsessed by this idea. So that was what's rolling around in his head is how to problem solve, how to take care of Mom. And of course, about the shower again. He keeps saying the workers are really good, but I want my showers. And I explained to him, it's not a nursing care facility, Dad, but we're here. Okay. And that's all he can say. So it's 6:30. He thinks it's 10 a.m. He's got some coffee, the really good stuff. And then he wakes up a little later and smells coffee and asks to have some more. At one point, I can see another change happening. He's seeing things. He insists there's this laundry bag for housekeeping hanging on a chair in the other room. I should go get it and make sure that the housekeeper gets it. And it was his sweater. He turns the TV on, but he's not really watching it. He's got the remote in his hand. The volume was off, and he's not surfing for commercials. So, a change. This is very different, because normal dad would be surf on that TV, and to the point where it's very annoying to everyone else. He has ice cream. He's very weak and hardly lift the spoon to his mouth. His eyes are getting sunken, and his lips are swollen and purple, and his tongue is miscolored. And so things are happening. Then suddenly, around 9:30, he calls out, "Morphine!" I couldn't believe it. He said, "It hurts like hell." Wow. So I pushed his button that's on his necklace here. It's a crazy system because, you're in assisted living, so they have to have all the meds, and they come with a dose. And, this is the logistics of it. This is a man who can't swallow or eat or anything, but it goes under, they have a little plastic syringe that's just the plastic, not the needle, and they squeeze it into his mouth under the tongue. It's just a small amount, but very efficient, and so there. The man who said, "I've got no pain, I'm sleeping just fine," finally, and admitted he had anxiety. It hurts like hell. So an hour later, he accepted another dose, and I had called hospice, and they suggested adding Ativan. That's what would help with anxiety, and my dad definitely had a lot of anxiety, agitation going on, which is totally, incredibly understandable. He wanted a sip of water, and he can't communicate. He just grunts and gestures as a form of communication. He had me hold up his arms so that the water would go down. It's scary stuff. He wanted to know what time it was by pointing to his wrist. He wanted to see that he's reaching for the menu for lunch for the day. He's pointing to that because he was always concerned about getting his lunch order in, even though, since I'd been there, he really wasn't eating except ice cream. Yeah. I think he either wanted it for himself or he was thinking about me, What might I want to eat from the dining hall? But I went and got him his ice cream, and he had some ice cream. That's a common memory. So ice cream becomes the invoker of memories. About an hour later, he says, "Take me to the desk." So I move him over to the wheelchair, and he goes to his desk and he starts up the CPU, and he shows me poker, and he says, "I have a method for," he had a method for playing poker on the desktop. Not for real money, but, just for the fun of it. And he plays and he loses, and he says, "Oh well." Back to the chair. And then at noon, another hour later, he says, "Take me to my desk." And, "Sue, let me be." And so I'm sitting in the other room. I can hear him. He spends an hour and a half writing a check for my daughter before he calls me. My dad had been giving a couple of checks to family members who were moved to new houses and so forth, and he knew that my daughter had just purchased a house and with her boyfriend, and he wanted to help out with that. So he couldn't see the line on the check or what he wrote. He's not seeing things, he's just writing. And I said, Dad, this is not necessary. It's okay. Stop that, he says. So he continued, and I pointed to the line, and he signed his name. Yeah. Taking care of family members. And a couple hours later, he accepted morphine and Ativan. His pastor came. His granddaughter came. And then later on, after the pastor left, I said, "Hey, Dad, you want to listen to some music?" I thought, it would help calm him. He didn't want spa music or calming music. He said, "California guy." And I knew what he meant. I loved that I knew what he meant. He meant Linda Ronstadt, the California guy. She once was with Jerry Brown. And so I put on Linda Ronstadt, which, wow, blew me away. Dad never listened to that kind of music that I ever knew of. He wanted something different that he liked. I just was blown away by his choice, and happy. So mid-afternoon, we pushed the button for more morphine, and his granddaughter has to go find the med techs to make sure they'll bring it. We sat there, and Dad fell asleep, and we were talking about his breathing and the sounds. He wasn't whimpering anymore. He was calm, and a small heaving sighs, and there was a snore. It was different again. Then it was time for his granddaughter to leave, and she went over and put her hand gently on his arm, and he woke up. She said, "Grandpa, I've got to go. I love you." And he said, "I love you." We didn't know, but these were going to be his last words, his last goodbye. So I'd been consulting with the hospice folks. He got another dose of morphine, and then we're going to wait and see what happened before he went to bed that night. And my younger sister arrived. His breathing was more labored, and late that night, around 10 or so, my sister left. I put on some music, as much for myself as for Dad, and I just talked to him out loud. I was laying in my little cot at his feet, telling him how much I loved him, how his family loved him, what I learned from him. Just talking, and I drifted off. Just after midnight, an aide came in. They had changed their shifts, and she came in and, "How are you all doing? Do you need anything?" And I said, No, it's okay. We're okay. And she left, and I got up and, Dad. 92 years, 4 months, 5 days, my dad had died. I felt no fear. I was calm. Oh, Dad. And I felt his warmth. I held his hand. I called my wife, and we talked. And then I called my sister, who had just left a couple hours before. I called the med tech again, and she was amazing. She called hospice for me and sat with me. And my sister came and got my sister in because she had to go unlock the door. Hospice came, and they were amazing. They called the prearranged funeral home to come and collect my dad's body. Fortunately, my sister was able to get back before they came, and we were both okay. We stood there and we were calm. And yeah, there was no parade. That's exactly what Dad would have wanted. He would have hated to have his body trooped out in front of everybody. And I went to my sister's home. Woke up the next day. So the next morning, I had to call my brother and my other sister and my daughter. I made sure to call my daughter after her work day. Each of us chose different tasks. My younger sister and I went to the funeral home. I have to say, putting all your affairs in order really makes a difference, because I went there expecting to be upsold and all that stuff, and no, everything was taken care of, and they were so professional and good about it all. Everything was already paid for and done, and that was an amazing gift that Dad gave us all, that his affairs truly were in order. Made it so that we could think about him and be there for each other rather than thinking about all the dumb stuff, We called the Dad's pastor, went and saw Mom, and started working on getting hospice for Mom. How am I experiencing all this? What is it like? When you can prepare for someone's death, you know that it's coming. You handle it so differently than a surprise death. And I've been observing myself through grief. And there are those days when something comes up and I miss him terribly. I'm grateful for minimal lingering, that my dad didn't have to linger and he was in pain. I'm very grateful for the staff and the management of his facility, the caregivers, laundry and housekeeping, memory care people, the dining hall. Hospice has been wonderful. I'm grateful for the space to have been able to be there with him. Very grateful for the support of my wife so that I could be there. My dad and my mom for having put all their affairs in order. My sisters, my brother, my godchild, all the family. To have a dad that supports and provides and loves and nourishes and models. I'm grateful for the fact that my dad had a long life and without very many health issues. He had a good life. He had so many experiences and taught us so much. For the man he was in his marriage and taking care of Mom. I'm grateful to have been there, seeing death and not being afraid, seeing peace. That was the last visit, and we keep moving on, carrying Dad, his memory, his legacy with us. We miss him. This was the second episode in a limited series of Moving On, part of retired.